to the feedback.
Trying to get all set up. Thanks. Okay. All right, ready? All right, my name is Aaron Davis. I've got David Beecher and Matt Cristiano from Planetary Pinball. We're here to talk about well, what we've been doing with our hardware, and also talk a little bit more about what this whole like WPC 2.0 thing is all about. Just gonna scroll just a little bit. So part of what we tried to do, we set out a while back to create a new hardware platform, and one of the things that was important about that was not just doing just hardware or just software, but creating like an ecosystem basically to like make it easier for people to build and design and create games, so that it works as a workflow that fits whatever different groups like doing together. So whether it's like the dream up phase or design or build or programming, we want to make sure that the hardware design itself didn't require you to jump ahead and move back through different phases to actually have an effective experience. A lot of us have had ideas and stuff like that we've dreamt up as far as wanting to create and build games. And getting in and getting started is usually kind of the hard part. So one of the things that we're really excited about, the approach we've had with hardware, was to make it easy to get to a physical prototyping stage as quickly as possible. So you're just taking our hardware basically out of the box, plugging it in into a WPC cabinet, for example, or in just a custom mode. Being able to really quickly get flippers flipping and stuff and getting working on shot lines is really exciting. It gets you to that result of actually working on a game a lot faster. Scroll ahead today. In general, like the hardware itself, I mean, some of you have seen pictures and stuff online. One of the goals that we wanted to do from a design standpoint was create hardware that was, in the case of the PC board especially, designed to go right into that existing cabinet and that existing form factor, and not require a lot of understanding of rearranging wires and cables and things like that. So that's why the hardware form factor itself was designed to be easy to integrate. As far as like building and creating board designs themselves, there's a lot of different approaches to hardware, and Dave will go a little bit further into the boards themselves. But part of what we want to make sure that we did was bring in new technologies and new designs where they were best suited, but still build upon what our forefathers did in the original game designs, and make sure that we're truly advancing it and not just introducing other complications. Do you want to go through some of the boards?
Yeah, sure. So can you pull an image up at the same time?
I do this one. Oops, there we go.
So this here is our first, board getting close to release. It is a WPC board. It will go into the WPC game plus WPC-S. What we try to do is keep most of the traditional connectors, that were on the game, like for the driver board, the display board, sound board. But then what we also did is we added some extra features, like for instance, 200 LEDs can be controlled from an LED port we added. We also found when we were playing with this that the DMD controller was really difficult to write to. It relied so much on timing from the original WPC board as far as clocks and all that. So we decided to put the DMD connector right on here as well and be able to drive that directly from this board as well. So the concept is just making it so the exact same form factor, literally pull the old board out, plug this one in, you're kind of ready to go. Also, the main controller on here, we've made it so it supports a BeagleBone Black. So it's I believe it's 1 gigahertz is the current one we're playing with, a 1 gigahertz processor that's running the gameplay. So there's several processors on here is where we're getting all the speed from. There's one directly, we have an ARM running directly to the DMD processor. We have one other ARM that's controlling all the I/O on the board. And then we have another processor controlling all the RGB LEDs. So when you're writing code for this, all of the 1 gigahertz processor is really for rules, controlling the dots on the display, running the RGB. So it's like we tried to make this so simple that the software, who's ever writing the software for this, would not have to worry about timing or anything else. It's all taken care of, all the hardware on this board. We also have an expansion port down here. I don't know if you guys can see that on the screen, the little black connectors, the 2 RJ45 jacks. What that's for is we also created some boards that are networked into the system. This one here is a 1616 board. I don't know if you have an image of that. So we made this board so it could mount either horizontally or vertically in the machine. It takes up almost no room when it's up against, all the coils, lamps, and all that in the machine. So this here is like 16 drivers and 16 switch inputs, all on one board. We added some features like there's no fuses on here, so as far as the power supplies and all that, there's no high voltage on here once that's all cut. Let's see, what else can I say about this one?
It's like the daughter board expansion.
Oh, yeah.
One of the areas that, when you create a hardware platform like this, it's all in and out. It's all stuff that's been done dozens of times before. One of the things we want to do is create an interface that let third parties create and design components for pinball machines, not knowing anything about how your game's set up. I mean, we all know that you can, pull switches and drivers and stuff like that to amass some interesting pinball component, but those skills don't overlap super well. To have a third party be able to say, I want to have a face that moves and animates maybe like a Rudy, but that designer will let you 3D print a design that looks just like your boss, and you're going to put him at the end of the play field there. He can interface and create the movement that it takes to control that device and use a standard component that would plug into our system here and be read by the controller itself. So it really separates that and creates the opportunity for a third-party marketplace for new pinball toys that are designed to be plug and play. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
When you say high voltage, how high do you need?
Well, these boards here we made so it'll go up to 100 volts on all the drivers, but just like all the pinball machines, like our forefathers did on the pinball, we're only switching the ground. So all of the high voltage first goes to the coils, and then when we turn on the MOSFETs to ground, so it'll take anything up to 100 volts on the current MOSFETs that we're using. And it was really challenging because, when pinball first started out, all the power supplies in there for all the logic was 5 volts. And we ran into some real challenges going to a 3.3 volt system, which, most of the processors are running at that voltage or less today. It takes about 2 volts to turn on a MOSFET. And when you get glitches from, it first turning on, all that current going through that MOSFET, it's like they'll start to turn off. They go back into a linear mode and will start, dissipating more power, heating up, causing problems. So, yeah, it was amazing all the challenges we ran into. So we literally had to come up with a unique way to sit there and turn those things on hard. And it's kind of weird. I was trying to use like these MOSFET drivers that I found online, and they were just a fortune. It was like $1 or $2 a piece. And then we've got 16 of those on there. Do the math. This thing became like really expensive very quickly. So I started looking at, what would our forefathers have done there? And I found these LM324 op amps that were just a dime a dozen. So we literally are using an op amp to drive, it's a quad op amp. We sit there and we drive the MOSFETs with that. We have a 12 volt gate voltage now, so they're hard on. And it was just things that we did like this that kind of embraced the old but added to the new. And hopefully it becomes a real robust solution for use in the games.
Well, I think that's what's cool too about the chance to kind of reinterpret like how these things get put together from a modular standpoint, making sure that it's designed in a way that's reliable and easy to use and build, but also at the same time like being able to use the tried and true existing ways to do things, but also work in smaller part packages and things like that that really like get that down to that small footprint that's easy to integrate into a design. Yeah, the image I throw up here, this is the smart fuse block that we came up with. You want to tell them how that one works?
Absolutely, yeah.
I love this one.
This is one of my favorite boards that we've done so far because, it's so simple, like a fuse block. They're everywhere, they're cheap, but the real challenge came up with like, how do we turn off the high voltage in a game? I looked at all the circuits in the past, and usually what happened is there was a switch in the beginning or the front of the coin door. So when you open up that switch, the high voltage is cut. They ran AC to that switch. When you run AC to a switch, the contacts can be much smaller, and it was a simple thing. So I want to do the same thing for DC, but the switch, they don't really make a switch that would control that much current in the DC. So I figured, man, well, we need to make a fuse block anyway, or have some type of way to, to protect everything. So what if I could integrate some new switch in that fuse block as well? So what I came up with was the small board here, and on the front you see almost no electronics. Maybe you can kind of see the LEDs peeking through a little bit, but I also want a simple way to tell which fuses are blown or not. So you guys can probably tell from here which one of those fuses is blown. no explanation necessary. But so what I did on here is there's a single pin. It's called enable, and it enables 2 of the fuses. So you can run any voltage you want in here from 12 to 80 volts in. And when you turn that enable pin on, 2 of those fuses go hot. In fact, I can just turn off the enable pin right now, and you'll see that's kind of what it looks like. 2 of the fuses just went out. So that means the high voltage has been cut on those 2 circuits. But all you have to do is ground 1 pin. It turns on the MOSFET on this board, and then those 2 channels are back on. But figured, hey, we need to do it. Let's make it cool. So
It's like be able to open the cabinet and see from the back, like it's that one back there.
yeah.
Yeah, so then another thing that we wanted to be able to do was work in RGB LED lighting kind of by default. So for anyone, especially like creating a new game, why not take advantage of RGB LEDs? It's fun to use. It adds a whole new way to paint and design scenes. And what we've done is try to create a form factor that made it economical to work in RGB LEDs from the get-go. You're not having to get a special mounting bracket and then a component and then run wires all over the place to make it work. And we've iterated a few different ways on that over time. And actually, do you have one of the white ones here?
Yeah.
So like, the first pass at it, somebody saw these last year, was like, just throwing an LED on a PCB and call it good, and that's kind of big. And since then, it's like spending time actually using the stuff that we're making. You find from a designer standpoint, it's like, well, I'm having to move so many things around, it just doesn't fit super well. So then we came up with a smaller design that we were really excited about, and actually it anchors with a single connection. And the goal with the layout was to say, if I put these onto a playfield that I was salvaging, like why not use the existing screw holes? So they're designed to line up just right. So based on the same distance from the center of the insert and stuff. And we thought that was pretty cool. And actually, like on this one, it's got a 6-pin connector to it, so that I can actually just run voltage data ground in one direction, and then they're all the RGB LEDs. For those who don't know, it's the WS2812S now that we're using, which has the reverse polarity protection. So if you're in there trying it out for the first time, you're not blowing them up like would happen with the previous version we used.
And it's not just one you blow up, it would be the whole strand. If you had 50 LEDs on there, you just took them all out.
Yeah, so like what was cool though was like, we got these down, we liked them, and then we took another pass at it and we slimmed it down even further. So this is the one that we're gonna be putting out. It's a very small form factor. But what's cool about it is that like when you go from laying a game out, it's a very small piece you can lay on very easily. But also it's using an RGB LED that's very common. And so now we can work into our protocol on how you actually communicate to the LEDs. Very standard. So you can send standard commands to be able to light and control all the LEDs. And then there's another design that we're working through here. This is just a prototype, one of them. But it takes that same piece, and because of the way we place the connectors, you can also mount vertically. So in this prototype one, it's actually using a separate PCB here, but this is designed to be your through-hole GIs. So if you can get the diffused lighting, not the obnoxious super bright LED lighting, it really kind of changes the dynamic for how you design a game. Like just adding LEDs to a game doesn't make it better by default. In some ways it doesn't necessarily jive with the light or the original aesthetic and design that the game came up with. But for someone starting from scratch, you can have a happy-go-lucky to creepy, dark, scary mode that shifts around just by playing with lighting. So a lot of people that have talked to us about creating new game concepts that have been coming in, from animation backgrounds or theater or movie set backgrounds, set design and stuff. Hearing what they want to do with lighting, the RGB LEDs get really exciting. So our goal also at the same time was to create a form factor that we could release them pretty cheap, so that it wasn't cost prohibitive to try and bring these in. By the time you buy a bracket and an insert LED and wire it up, it gets to be about the same price. So that's a lot on the light.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot of light. And it's just getting that form factor just right. Man, it was way more difficult than I anticipated because even where does the screw hole go in relation to everything else? Because there's so little, the traces on there were so close. Right. But what we ended up doing was we tried to make it the exact same width as a normal bayonet base. Right. So it's like if you unscrew the original bulb, put that in its place, everything lines up just as if it was the metal bulb.
Yeah, and we've shared them with some of our friends and stuff like that. And one guy called us up going, "Did you know that they totally line up the same exact way as the old ones? Did you do that on purpose?" And again, it's like, well, we did think about that. And he's like, "You guys think of everything." So yeah, so where do we want to go next?
Probably talk about the software a little bit.
Cool. So actually, we want to go through so we missed this section. We've rehearsed this so many times.
Yeah, I guess the commercial grade we could talk about. So, there's a lot of hardware out there, and it's like one of the big problems is that as far as EMI, ESD, UL, all these things that need to be taken care of to release a machine. It's, a lot of times, who made the hardware? It's like, you don't know what the background is on all this, and I don't know that a lot of people have been spending time, looking at these type things. And all it takes is one person to run into a problem with FCC, and it's like all of a sudden a whole company can be shut down. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we're trying to approve everything that we can ahead of time, because let's face it, a pinball machine is not a Faraday cage. It's a lot of wood. Signals, the EMI gremlins are going to get out of that thing. And over the years, like I noticed machines nowadays don't even have metal in the back box, where all the boards are. So I don't know how well that's going to work or not work, but I don't think a lot of current machines have been making it into the EMI chamber. So we're trying to do the best that we can up front, so that your experience, if you want to release a game, you're not going to run into all these problems. So it's no guarantee,
right,
but we're trying to do what we can on our part to try to make that whole production cycle easier.
Yeah, because we figured that all the energy it takes to go make a game. There's a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of commitment to actually making it the best it can be. The skill sets don't always go all the way down to someone like Dave here who can go through and dial it all in and figure out how to make it safe and pass all in certifications it's supposed to. But what we wanted to be able to do is say, start with what we've got, and if you're going through and if you're buying standard pinball components and things like that, and you get to the end and it's not passing, it's almost like we want to know why, because what crept in that shouldn't have worked. But from a support standpoint, that's an area that we're willing to consult on making a game viable for a broader release. And I think that when we've talked to a lot of game designers and stuff, the skill sets that overlap between artists and dreamers and conceiving great ideas and actually physically building stuff is that's fairly complementary. Most of us can do a lot of that stuff, but when it gets down to actually making something pass certain regulations for a certain certification, even I go, Dave, check that out. Figure out what's going on here. And I think that's something that we want. People feel like if they put the time and energy into building a game, that they're not just kind of on their own. So again, trying to pay attention to the opportunity that I think a lot of people wrestle with is if I want to go make a custom game and people like it and I want to sell it, that opens up a whole new can of worms all the way down the line. And we want to pay attention to what people's challenges are and what the needs are, and make sure that if we're coming at it from a hardware platform approach, if people come to us for that and what else they would need, it's something we want to be kind of prepared to offer. I think that's kind of exciting.
And also, since we have all the libraries for all the parts, we want to kind of make it open. So if you need an LED array, you want a board in the middle of your machine that's got 15 LEDs, right there. Don't want to have to wire each one up individually. We're trying to set ourselves up so we can do that very quickly. If you give me some DXF files from what your mechanics look like, then I want to be able to turn a board out in a couple days for you. Just get the design all done and kind of get that approved. So we're going to offer those services as well to try to make your experience positive.
Well, and that's solving a different problem, because again, you can get all the pieces of parts working, the game works well, and it takes forever to put it together in your design, for example. We've had people ask, if I gave you a layout and said I want these lights right here, would you make that exact piece? And that's paying attention to what happens after you've made a game and looking at the process of actually producing and releasing titles. Because if the thing that you made that's super cool is really expensive to actually produce, that's something that maybe when you're making your first game, you don't think all the way down the line there. We're just trying to impart any experience and things we've seen into that process in the beginning. So going into software. So when we started making the hardware, the focus was making sure that the protocol and how you communicate with it is as fast and as efficient as possible, and really lets you not be concerned about the physical form factor of the hardware. Whether you're using the WPC interface or some other controller that we'd offer, it doesn't require you to say, okay, I'm using matrix switches in this case, but these are direct switches over here. It's just a switch. And so when we started to go on beyond that, where it's okay, we feel like the internal communication is moving along well, now the outside world needs to tap into that. And so seeking other people in the community that have some of this knowledge, a lot of you are familiar with the free WPC project. And we'd reached out to Brian Dominy way back, and super nice guy. I asked all my friends who might have known him or did tournament play with him, and really great guy. And actually got the chance to get on the phone with him and talk to him about what we're doing with this hardware. And Brian's a software guy, and for those who don't know, he actually created a way to write new code against the original WPC games and the processors, working with the 2 MHz processors and stuff, which is feet on its own.
Yeah,
I mean, it
it's
had to
just-
create its own compilers and everything. It was
It's like a bridge from the old to the new, you know? It's just like, what a wealth of information. I had a lot of fun talking with them about all this.
And so when it gets down to like, okay, here's a guy who went through this enormous effort to get to where you can control a pinball game. Obviously, like you can't take full control over every aspect the way you'd like. So some of the greatest wisdom that he shared with us was, you know, what are the problems that should be solved in hardware, and what are the problems that should be solved in software? And I think that's where the relationship kind of started, you know, and it went from like, okay, somebody else wanted to talk about free WPC to, okay, here's an interesting piece of hardware. And it became, okay, when can we talk next? And so getting Dave involved on that phone conversation, you know, they're checking each other out, like, okay, all right, so you think you know what you're doing with hardware, huh? Well, what would you do to solve this problem? And really quickly, they kind of checked each other out, and then it was like, okay, this is great. And so, you know, the initial goal was to look for a way to create, create the interfaces to the outside world. And at the same time, Brian really wanted to create, you know, a new framework, you know, a new like, you know, Python framework, for example, that was designed to work in more you know, modern game designs or game design conventions, but to be truly like a game framework, not like so bound to the hardware itself. And so through a lot of great conversations, you know, moved down that road and we're progressing. Right in the middle of it, like you got a big job promotion, and it kind of sucked up some time. And so what we sought out to do was find you know, other support. But Brian, being as awesome as he is, he's going, you know, I don't want to hold back the project, but I also don't want to go away from it, you know. And so we've been fortunate enough to work with some really smart people that we can engage with and have Brian still advise and weigh in and give feedback and suggestions and stuff too. So like, you know, as we started like, you know, showing off the hardware to friends and stuff that we work with, our friend Gary introduced us to Roy Eltham, who has been working with us on the C interface and the libraries and stuff like that that kind of speak out to the outside world, the other high-level code, and also with a lot of emulation work, and it's been just a blast. I mean, it's like, I had this moment like as we were kind of all starting to collaborate and introduce new people into the mix, where it really felt like this is a project, and I want to make sure that, you know, new people that come in aren't, you know, messing up the vibe and stuff. And so it was really kind of a positive point. And getting everybody all on the lines and being able to share like, you know, approaches and how we can solve, like, you know, working for the hardware on out to the software. Anytime you get like, you know, engineers and software people together, it can turn into an ego match and like, you know, differences of opinions and fighting to win. And that was not the case at all here. And it's been like an amazing experience because everybody's coming into it trying to solve and bring to pinball and new pinball, I guess like a fresh approach to things. And the fortunate thing is like it's very complementary. I mean, like the differences of opinions were less about like my way versus your way, more about, oh, I didn't know you guys were already doing that. Okay, I think that's cool. So, I mean, that takes us out from like the hardware itself out to the C libraries interface, like with any language that can support C libraries. And then there was the challenge of like a game framework. And I think that the hard part about creating a new game framework for a specific piece of hardware is you're going to be catering to and working with people who are using your specific hardware. And truly, if it's truly like a broad, open game framework, you want anybody who's making games using that framework and taking best advantage of it. And an open solution like really like gives people the ability to weigh in from their own perspective and feel like, you know, it's helping to advance the effort, you know. And so we've sought out and we've met some people that are creating a new framework, and they're not ready to share it yet, so that'll be coming out soon. But the best thing about the approach is it really takes the game frameworks and separates it from hardware. And that interface between them is really about the hardware providers providing the best resources to the game frameworks to make them perform as best they can. And then the community as a whole can like have a framework that doesn't matter what kind of hardware it's on, it's about being the best game framework it can be. And that information should be getting shared sometime this summer. So we're excited about that. And I think that it's the right approach to it. We definitely didn't want to be the ones leading the charge on a new game framework. I think this approach is going to be much more what pinball programmers need.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's see, what do we do next? What can we do with this hardware? Okay, so for those of you who like met us last year and stuff, I've had a lot of people ask, like, how did you end up on this WPC hardware? Like, what happened to the idea of totally new custom games? And it was opportunity. And I think that, you know, we went out to Chicago last year to the Chicago Expo, and it was great. We got to see a lot of people we've become friends with and see a lot of cool projects. And there was a lot of like custom games there. And I think that with all the effort and stuff that it takes to make and produce a custom game, to see that stuff brought to a show and what it takes to get to a show, we understand how much work that is. Some of the people that we met and got to know more is Kevin from Skip B. We'd met at our show here last year, and he was actually one of the first people that was like, "Hey, this is kind of interesting." And actually, I talked to him much, and I think it was in the same room. We got to go out there and see what they were doing with the Predator and with the Sonic there. And actually, we'd sent out some of our Generation 2 hardware, and just out of timing, they didn't get the whole chance to put it all together. But somebody saw the Star Fox game that was sitting in our booth out there. It was just, it was a cool experience. There was, Ben had his America's Most Haunted there, and everything else that lined the rows. The Bride of Pinball 2.0 and everything. And there was a lot of excitement about this custom games, but there's also kind of this I guess maybe a dark cloud over it at the same time, where it's there wasn't that legitimate way to work with licensed content and actually create a product and take that to market. And having the opportunity to talk to Rick out there, the opportunist in me goes, there's a great opportunity here to actually make and do some cool things with existing pinball form factors. But being familiar enough with IP and licensing restrictions, it was pretty clear what they were up against, being a licensee of the Williams Ballet content. So what we ended up doing was coming up with a proposal that said, if we were able to deliver a piece of hardware this way and develop an ecosystem that says code can be managed a certain way, downloads and updates can be managed this way, and actually be able to create a hardware-software combination that's designed to, like I said, they made a Totan 2.0 game, for example, actually have that piece of hardware bound to the software and distribute that in a way that met the requirements of Williams Ballet for licensing. And by proposing that, okay, in theory that sounds great. Then it was creating the hardware to support it. And so that's where we took basically the concepts that we've had as far as a controller design and added the interfaces to it that let you, basically make it a drop in and take the CPU board out of a WPC game and put this in its place and plug it in and take control. And when the hardware was real, it was very exciting. And so much so that when we brought it up and showed it off, I think it was just before the Texas show, Rick's going, "Oh, you know what? Let's bring this up this weekend." And I was like, "All right." It's "Oh, we talk about things that are coming all the time." And I was like, "Okay, that's cool." And not really realizing what that would mean. It was a lot of people seeking out and wanting to know about the system and what the goals are, and what the restrictions are, and what the requirements are, and on and on and on and on. And a lot of those details and stuff like that, we were still hashing out and stuff at the time. But what was exciting about it was it showed that there was really an interest and stuff in being able to do that type of thing. So I think where are we at here? So one of the things that was a big deal is you can work out agreements and stuff like that lock everything down, super rigid, and you can't do anything with it, and that meets all the requirements and you're done. And one of the things that was really important in being able to deliver a solution like this that was designed to be this drop-in piece into your game was if you're going to go through and create new code, create a Totan 2.0 where it's the new adventures of Tales of the Arabian Nights, that's one layer there. You also need to be able to kind of switch it back to play the classic mode, where it's the original game as it was originally conceived. But the other part that we want to make sure was allowed to exist was, we just kind of call it tinker mode, where if you have a game and you buy this 2.0 game and you put it in there and you're having a blast and you get an inkling to want to learn how to program a pinball machine, the best way to start is from an actually fully functioning working game, not one that was an abandoned project from somebody else that partially burned and you're soldering all that together. That's not the way to start with programming. So we looked at it as a great way to say, if you really want to create a cool product, but also give the opportunity for people to really get in and learn how to write code for a pinball machine, we all think it's super easy. It's just switches and inputs, right? But there's physics involved, and there's lighting, and there's dynamics that you don't really experience until you're actually doing it. So we want to make sure that a product set that was going to be sought after by pinball enthusiasts who are excited about modding games, give them that chance to kind of take it a step deeper if they're so inclined. So that was the 3 modes, and then I'll go further. Okay, now it's your turn.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay, so we think there's really kind of 2 tracks that are happening here. There's games like Medieval Madness, where Doug is remaking that, and he's going to sell, at the end of the day, when he's done, thousands of games. So he's in the position to redesign the hardware, and he has the resources to do that because he can amortize that over quite a number of games. But if someone wants to make a game that they're going to ship 50 or 100 of, it's really not practical to do that. And that's why we're pretty excited about this product, because it gives the resources to people who want to make a short run of games without having to re-engineer the entire electronic system. So we stepped in to help them work out all the licensing issues with Williams and Bally. It's important to realize that while we have a license from Williams and Bally, we don't own that IP, and Williams is very particular about what happens with their IP. We have to be careful about that. So we're sort of the interface between Fast and Williams on this to make sure that everything is good as far as Williams is concerned. What else? What else do we want to talk about?
I don't know, what have you been up to?
I've been up to a lot of things. I mean, as you all know, Rick is not here because he's in Bloomington, Illinois right now, loading containers full of parts. But that's about all I had to say. I'll take any questions later.
Yeah, and I think that I think Matt's comment about the scope of a 2.0 project. I mean, you have a finite set of machines that could actually hold it if they all still exist. So I mean, the reach of something like that is really down to like the enthusiast level. And I think that and Rick and I have talked a lot about too, the business factors that are in play there, because what it turns into, different than like a whole physical game itself, it's almost like, I think a good analogy is kind of like producing an album. Like a band would say, we're going to put out our next record, and you could do it yourself at home on a 4-track, and it's out the door, and it doesn't cost hardly anything. If you sell a bunch, you make a lot of money. But that's not always what people want to create. It may be something where they want to have a string section, they want to bring in like an artist and a choreographer, and they want to work with this top producer at this great studio. Obviously, that project's going to be much more expensive to produce. So in the case of like a 2.0 game, if there's going to be a massive approach into an art theme package, maybe there's new plastics or new back glasses and stuff like that to support the actual game code itself. There's a chance for whoever's actually producing the game to say, okay, well the hardware part is a fixed thing, and the ecosystem to support it is already defined. So now my vision is to create this great thing, and I'm going to work with these people to do it. That's really what comes into play as far as working with Planetary to determine what IP and what stuff comes into play for this grand vision that they have, and then who do they bring in to help execute it. So it's not just about like the hardware to deliver code into an existing game. It's a way to kind of solve and standardize as many of the business factors that are in play as we can in one pass, so that what's unique about the situation is what the designer dreams up and wants to see happen. So that's where the greatest variable should lie. But I think we've been really fortunate to have both Rick and Matt be into the idea of like pushing the limits a little bit. Obviously, like pushing Williams and Bally to open up a little bit as far as the restrictions is a waste of time unless there's actually like a compelling reason to just turn and actually act on it. So I think that's been a really fun experience to show that like from their standpoint they've got way bigger deals and stuff like that going on all the time. This is almost more of like a labor of love, a cool way to kind of get the community something that they've been itching to do, and that legitimate path to do so is something that like we're really excited about being able to help deliver. So yeah, and actually we just got this last night. A friend of ours who wants to do some of these 2.0 games sent us a video that we want to share. So let me just grab this real quick. And he asked to remind you that he made this last night. And but it was a good opportunity to kind of show what's going on. So let's just go and play this.
Hello, Northwest Arcade
Oh, wait,
Gamers.
should plugged
Kevin
in too.
Cooley, Skippy, Pinball.
Is there an
Sorry
audio
I
out?
couldn't be there this weekend, but I'm sure you're having a
Oh,
heck
hey.
of a show.
One sec.
And I'm sure Aaron will fill me in on all this stuff I missed out on.
Let's see. I think this will work. Okay, we'll try this again. So, what do I do about this one?
Here, just use this one.
Okay, wait,
Okay,
okay.
perfect.
Let's see what we do.
Not quite so close.
Hello, Northwest Arcade Gamers. Kevin Cooley, Skippy, Pinball. Sorry I couldn't be there this weekend, but I'm sure you're having a heck of a show. And I'm sure Aaron will fill me in on all the stuff I missed out on over the next coming days. But I'm told I don't have a lot of time here, so let's cut straight to the point. I met Aaron last year at the Northwest show there in Tacoma, and while it's been fun to watch him grow and try new things, I think now it's time to talk about application. There's been a lot of talks about breathing new life into old games, updating stuff, but you know, it's a lot of fun to think about. But now, through the lanes that Fast Pinball has opened with the cooperation of Planetary, we actually have a very legitimate path to do this. And that really kind of gets your mind rolling towards just the torrent of good stuff that's out there that you could do. Just a few that come to mind, like Tales of Arabian Nights, and Getaway, High Speed 2, Whitewater. This could go on forever. But when the opportunity was put in front of me, I wanted to go a little bit deeper. Well, growing up in pinball, you know, there was a lot of ups and downs, especially back in the day. There was good games and there was bad games. There was really silly games, but then there was really awesome games. But to be fair, there was only one that marked the exact moment when pinball just changed forever. It was absolute mechanical marvel, and the thoughtful gameplay came together in this bright, colorful package that just everyone in the industry collectively just knew everything is different now. Everything is evolved. It's so advanced that I don't even have to introduce the game. The game can introduce itself. So I really kind of want you guys to light this room up for a second. Give a big round of applause for this guy. It's been about 25 years since he's been on any kind of stage like this. So give it your best and have a great show. Big thanks to Fast Pinball and Planetary and all you guys out there. Have a great show, and I'll see you guys later.
I'm watching ya. Hey. Hey. Ow. That was no accident.
So anyways, there you go. So Kevin said, you know, make sure they know that I made this last night, and I wasn't expecting to get that in the email, but it's, you know, talking with Kevin about like the opportunity with the 2.0 stuff, like, you know, from a new game company, what they found really appealing was the idea of like, you know, they've got their major titles that they're working on. You know, they're doing the Predator. They announced be announcing their next title, I think, at the next show coming up. But the idea of like, what do you do in those down cycles? You know, what do your artists work on? What do your programmers work on in between these major titles? And the idea of being able to go back into, you know, into history, basically what motivated him to get into programming and creating pinball machines himself, it was too exciting. And you know, he's got this long list of games and stuff he wants to work on. But what really excited about the idea of being able to work with, you know, designers that care that much about pinball. You know, I didn't expect it to go so philosophical so fast, you know, like so deep. But that's how Kevin is. You know, he's deep into the rules, deep into the game design, stuff like that. And I really look forward to seeing like, you know, what he wants to do with like the Funhouse game. But yeah, I don't know what else we want to talk about.
We should see if there's any questions out there.
Yeah, questions? Anybody?
If you have a question, could you please approach the microphone in the center aisle so our online listeners can hear your question?
One. All right.
We're good. Well, I want to thank everybody that's like been supportive of everything we've been doing. A lot of our friends have stepped up. Actually, Mike in the back put together a really cool video that we've been loading on our website and stuff. Excuse me, family and friends have been really supportive, and we're going to be at the booth. Everybody wants to come and look at anything more specific. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I just see a silhouette of bright light back there.
My understanding is that the Medieval Madness is not using your controller board, and I was wondering about the status of the emulator that they did for that, and whether that can be used in 2.0 games, or whether that's proprietary to somebody else.
We've actually been down the track. I mentioned before, our buddy Roy has been deep in the emulation world right now, and actually we're hoping to get some of that effort on display in the booth upstairs. But it's not just a matter of like run it on there and it works. It's a matter of like making sure that the emulation layer that's working with the existing ROMs and stuff is tailored to speak as best or work as efficiently as possible with our hardware itself. So the effort to make sure that emulation doesn't feel like emulation is the challenge at hand, and that's it's not an easy feat. So it's something that that I guess I can say like over the last like 5 days, it's been like 5 a.m. bedtimes and 7 a.m. even one of the days, just because it's so exciting to see like you're taking a great piece of hardware and put it in a cool game and then be able to actually light up some existing ROMs and see it play. It's hard to go to sleep when you see that
Wait, you
stuff
forgot the
together.
day that there was no sleep.
Yeah,
Remember that?
yeah, it was-
Just recently, we just got
Yeah.
our new boards, and man,
Yeah, so
Aaron came over. Oh,
dude,
go ahead.
No, you tell us, right, man.
Anyway, it was just great. I mean, it's like I don't know where the time went. I think last time I looked, it was 3, and the next thing it was 6, and then it's like, God, I got to go to work the next day.
And
How
I got
about
to
you,
drive
Aaron?
like almost an hour from his house to my house, so I got to get home before my kids get up because then I got to answer questions, But I think that's one of the things that's been like super fun about this stuff. I mean, like the fuse block Dave showed off, it was like we're very busy. We got the hardware lined up we got to do, and he whipped us up one night. He's like, I just had this vision. I want to see it made. And I mean, that's the really fortunate thing about like being able to work together on these parts is like we've got all these things that we want to be able to do, but we don't want to just kind of wing it. So I mean, being able to make and create some really cool hardware. I've got a crash course in like such rich, deep electronic design that I never would have got any other way. So when we get together, it's like, here's the new boards that came in, the blank PCBs, and we start putting the original ones together, or the initial ones together, where he'll build up, through the power supplies and the processors and stuff, to where it's like, if we get to here, then let's put the rest together. So, I'm under the microscope, like putting boards together and stuff, and I mean, until I met Dave, like there's nobody I worked with that outlasts me. It's like I'm usually the one going, come on guys, a little bit longer. So when nobody else is stopping me, it's like, oh my God, it's like I hear birds tweeting, So I mean, it's, and I think that everybody we've been working with, it's kind of the same way. It's like we love doing this. It's really fun to do, and it's really satisfying when you're actually holding something that's controlling something and talking to software. It really makes for like a really cool like development vibe, a cool community.
Yeah, Roy, for instance, man, he blew me away because we just meet Roy, and one of the things we were really behind on was the DMD, getting the DMD working, and I'm like, who is this guy? It's like I just gave him like a boilerplate code, like, man, this is probably going to take a couple weeks, and I don't know, Roy, was like 2 days, I don't know, 2-3
was
days. He had an
awesome.
image on there. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Processor he's never used before, and anyway, just working with some of these people are just fantastic.
Yeah, and getting to know him too, it was like, as we were trying to get this emulation stuff moving, I was like, hey, should we find some other developers to try and help support this? He's like, dude, I've been doing software for like, it was like 30 years or something like that. I got this.
Yeah.
And it's inspiring to see like other people's like, accomplishments and be able to inject some enthusiasm into it. And I'm just documenting, taking notes and doing whatever support I can to see these things come together, but at the same time learning and seeing how quickly it comes together. It's just a blast. And I've met so many very cool, very smart people that really want to see a lot of great things happen with pinball as a byproduct of all these things we've been doing here. And that's the kind of thing we want to be able to bring to the table so that, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, like the hard part is like, what's the cool design? What's that unique title? What's that fun rule set? We can systematize and standardize a lot of what it takes to make those, but we were saying like maybe an unofficial slogan is like, letting designers be designers since 2014. And I think that that's really why we're excited to reach out to people who want to make games and see what they make. Go to shows and see like what's running on our hardware, years from now, and that'd be pretty awesome. Anybody else have any questions? I'm going to bed.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for coming
Thanks.
down.